German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, in a letter to EU leaders, has suggested Ukraine should become an associate member before becoming a fully fledged member state.
Lithuania's Defense Minister Robertas Kaunas told Euronews that Europe must be prepared for the high probability of drone incursions. A report by the European Commission stated the EU economy has been worsened by the conflict in the Middle East and the economic growth forecast will drop.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has suggested Ukraine should become an associate member of the EU before becoming a fully fledged member state, a proposal aimed at breaking the two-year deadlock in the country's bid to join the bloc. In a letter to EU leaders, Merz said, quote, "It is now time to boldly move on with Ukraine's EU integration through innovative solutions." Merz noted it was obvious the EU will not be able to complete the accession process shortly, given the political complexities of ratification processes in various member states. The associate status, Merz argues in the document, would grant Ukraine access to the decision-making bodies, the European Council, the European Commission, and the European Parliament without voting rights or a dedicated portfolio. Crucially, it would enable Kyiv to request aid from other member states in the event of a new Russian attack. Merz first floated the idea during an informal summit of EU leaders in Cyprus last month, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky renewed his push for fast-tracked accession and rejected any proposal for symbolic membership. According to Merz, the proposal of associate membership, which has no precedent in history, is set to raise a couple of questions.
A day after Lithuania's capital of Vilnius was under a drone incursion and people were warned to take cover, Lithuania's defense minister Robertas Kaunas told Euronews that Europe must be prepared for the high probability that more will come. In the past 3 weeks, the region has seen at least half a dozen similar incidents. Kaunas says Lithuania is already increasing its air defense.
We're investing a lot in our air defense capabilities. New radars are coming. Part of them are already in Lithuania. Interceptor drones. Air defense experts from Ukraine arriving to Lithuania to help us enhance our air defense capabilities.
Kaunas says that Lithuania needs to invest 5.3% of its GDP in its national defense, the highest amount among all NATO countries. Wednesday's drone incursion, which was a possible Ukrainian drone jammed by Russia, was the first major alert that sent residents and political leaders in a EU and NATO capital rushing to shelters since Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine.
Israel began deporting hundreds of activists on Thursday after they were captured in international waters near Cyprus and detained in Israel. The activists were part of the global Sumud flotilla that had set sail to attempt to breach Israel's naval blockade of Gaza. Italians that were part of the flotilla described details of mistreatment and violence as they arrived in Rome.
Quando ci portano sulla nave prigione, so botte dall'inizio. Quindi quando io poi sono uscito da sto container di ingresso, lì ho trovato gli altri, anche gente che era stata picchiata molto più di me, c'era gente che non si reggeva in piedi, cioè che per andare al bagno c'erano dei bagni chimici e bisognava accompagnarli in due.
Even as the activists were released, international condemnation continued to pour in after a video shared by Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir showed him taunting the detained activists who were handcuffed and kneeling.
Insisto, ese tratamiento es monstruoso, es indigno, es inhumano. Exijo disculpas públicas a Israel. He convocado urgentemente al Ministerio de Asuntos Exteriores a la encargada de negocios de Israel para trasladarle todo nuestro rechazo, toda nuestra repulsa y toda nuestra repugnancia por ese trato absolutamente abominable e inaceptable.
Italy, Ireland, and Spain have called on the EU to sanction Ben-Gvir over the video showing the alleged mistreatment of the activists, many of whom are European citizens. U.S. Special Envoy to Greenland Jeff Landry is visiting the island for the first time since his appointment in December, and since a crisis over U.S. President Donald Trump's desire to annex the territory shook the NATO alliance earlier this year. While Trump backed down from his threats to seize Greenland, Landry says Washington needs to rebuild its presence in the Danish autonomous territory.
I think it's time for the U.S. to put its footprint back on Greenland. I think that you're seeing the president talk about increasing national security operations and repopulating certain bases in Greenland, and I certainly will be sending that message back to the president that everyone that I talk to here in Greenland would love to see the U.S. repopulate those bases.
Trump has repeatedly argued the United States needs to control Greenland because of national security concerns, claiming that if it does not, the island risks falling into the hands of China or Russia. It is also believed to have untapped rare earth minerals. To calm Trump and address his concerns, a U.S.-Danish Greenlandic working group was set up in January. During his visit, Landry met with Greenlandic officials, including Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen, who said on Monday that the talks were constructive but noted there was no sign that anything has changed in the U.S. position. He said it was important the working group find a solution. A 1951 defense pact, updated in 2004, already allows Washington to ramp up troop deployments and military installations on the island, provided it informs Denmark and Greenland in advance.
Russia says it has delivered nuclear munitions to field storage facilities in Belarus as part of major nuclear drills. Authorities on both sides released what they described as, quote, video evidence, a clip showing military vehicles driving into a forested area at an undisclosed location and missiles being loaded onto launchers. The Belarus Defense Ministry said the video shows the delivery of nuclear munitions to field storage points in the operational area of a missile unit in the country as part of military exercises. The 3-day nuclear drills, which started on Tuesday, are taking place across Russia and Belarus at a time when the Baltic states continue to be rattled by repeated drone incidents. On Tuesday, Russia's defense ministry announced that the exercises, which ran until Thursday, involved 64,000 military personnel and 7,800 pieces of equipment. Ukraine's security service said on Thursday that in response to the drills, Kyiv is stepping up security measures in northern regions to prevent Russian and Belarusian forces from infiltrating border areas and carrying out, quote, sabotage and terrorist acts.
The European Union has vowed to stand firm with its strategy to squeeze Russia's war economy as the United Kingdom scrambles to reassure its allies that its latest decisions fall short of lifting sanctions. London caused confusion on Tuesday when it published an open-ended license allowing the imports of diesel and jet fuel made from Russian crude and other countries, such as Turkey and India, where the oil is purchased at discounted prices. A separate license was also made available, which enables the provision of short-term service contracts with Russia's Sakhalin-2 and Yamal LNG projects until January 2027. The publication caught Brussels by surprise, who refrained from commenting on their allies' move, but stressed their continued commitment to banning Russian energy.
We remain committed to our sanctions on imports of Russian oil and gas, and we need to reiterate the call for Russians not to be benefiting from the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. It's too ironic.
The UK, however, sought to portray the debacle as a case of bad communication.
What we announced yesterday was a strong new package of new sanctions, going well beyond existing sanctions. So it's a new package. This includes new bans on maritime services on LNG and new bans on refined oil products from Russia. We also issued 2 targeted short-term licences to phase the new sanctions in and to protect UK consumers.
Ukraine said it was clarifying with the UK what the new move would entail, noting that it was concerned with the added revenues it may generate for Moscow's budget. The news from London also comes just one day after U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirmed Washington will extend its waiver on Russian oil at sea for the 3rd time this year.
The EU economy has downgraded its economic growth forecast for 2026 from a 1.4% rise in GDP to 1.1%. A report by the European Commission stated the EU economy has been worsened by the conflict in the Middle East and a resulting surge in energy prices. Meanwhile, EU inflation is predicted to reach 3.1% this year due to the disruption around the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's key oil and gas shipping routes. The report said that before the end of February, the EU economy was expected to keep growing moderately as inflation continued to fall. EU officials say the shock recalls Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine and warns that Europe's dependence on imported fossil fuels leaves it highly vulnerable. But that thanks to years of investment in renewable energy, the bloc is better prepared to face the crisis. The Commission also warned that shortages of refined oil products, fertilizers and other industrial inputs could lead to the increase of food and manufacturing costs across Europe.